This is Spotlight Episode 3, recorded on January 19th, 2016. Spotlight is brought to you by AndyMark. Don't forget that every Tuesday is Deal Day, where you can find some amazing prices on some of the best products for your FRC robot. Go over to AndyMark.com and click on Tuesday Deals every Tuesday to save. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Spotlight, where we interview interesting people from the FIRST community so you can be more informed and engaged. I'm Tyler Olds.
And I'm Colin Foltz.
We're very excited to be introducing our guest for Spotlight tonight. Glenn Lee is the director of the Wailua STEM Learning Center and the Hawaiian Kids programs, including the legendary Hall of Fame 359 in both FRC, and they're also engaged in VEX. Welcome to the show, Glenn.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Glenn, before we really get into the history of 359, let's talk quickly about what I'm sure is on everybody's mind, the 2016 game Stronghold. Now that we're a week in, what are your impressions? What are you guys thinking?
Well, I think this game is definitely different from years past. I think in the past you had games where teams had to figure out how to score, but this game involves a lot more. You really have to think about your drivetrain and how you get around the field because of those 9 different barriers, and so it definitely makes it a little bit more challenging, and teams have to be more creative as they not only have to get through those defenses, but to try to score as well.
Yeah, definitely. There's an opportunity or not an opportunity, but there's a chance there could be a very congested field out there. What do you tell us about? Obviously it's build season. There's a lot going on, but what are you able to tell us about 359 and the direction that they're looking at going into for Stronghold?
Well, I think because we've been doing FIRST for a while, like many other teams that have done FIRST, there's a lot of past games you could look at as far as how to go about scoring. I think the big hot topic on Chief Delphi, for example, was whether you make a catapult or a shooter, and there's a lot of videos out there. You have the 3-day robots, a lot of them doing similar things. But I think that the real challenge this year is it's that 16-inch bar where you have to be 14 inches or lower. And I think the real challenge is if you're going to make a robot that can go below that bar, are you able to still do all of the other things? For example, like hanging at the end. I mean, can you build a robot that can still go below that bar and yet do all of the other parts of the game?
Yeah, the packaging is going to be really interesting for teams that choose to do the low bar, and it's going to be tough. I agree to try to do every single one of those defenses, and if you want to scale, I wonder how many teams we're going to see that are really are able to do everything in the FRC game. It's going to be interesting. Yeah,
I agree. It's going to be even for veteran teams, it's going to be a pretty big challenge to try and do everything.
So, Glenn, you've been through a lot of build seasons now with the Hawaiian Kids. What advice do you have for other teams to be successful, especially as we enter this second and third week of build season?
Well, I think the main thing that we try to convey to our team is that you have 6 weeks, but we treat it like a 5-week build season. And so you try to anticipate that you're going to have problems. In reality, every time you come up with an idea or concept and you try it out, it almost never works perfectly the first time you do it. So we try to anticipate, especially for us since we travel a lot, we try to anticipate things that may come up, and we spend more time, we actually spend more hours during the beginning of the season than towards the end in most seasons. Now, sometimes things don't work out. Like for us last year, a lot of our ideas didn't work out in the beginning. But because we had that mindset, we were still able to finish by the end of the build season and to be able to compete, and we were pretty successful last year.
And you guys do a lot of competitions each year, and I think we'll talk a little bit about that later. But how are you able to just be ready to go for competition, the next competition? What planning or process goes into that?
Well, for us, I think what a lot of teams do is they start looking at their travel plans or how they coordinate the logistics between regionals and throughout the whole, from build season down to championships. For us, it starts from the first day of school. I mean, we're already planning our trips out. We're anticipating whether or not, how many kids are going to be going to the trips. We start working on the other, like the shipping plans and those things. We do all of that well in advance. And I think you just spend more time on it and do it much earlier so you don't burn yourself out.
Yeah, that's a really good point of just making, prior proper planning, right? And that goes for everything, not just the robot itself.
Right, absolutely.
So last week on our show recap that we had, we briefly discussed some of the predictions about the game and some of the insights that we had for the game. Glenn and Colin, if you want to chime in on this too, do you mind if we run a few past you and see what your opinions are on this?
Okay.
Sure.
All right. So what do you guys feel the toughest defenses to damage are going to be this year? What are going to be the hardest defenses to get through?
Well, I guess for us right now at where we're at, we think we have, we started working on some designs and whatnot and some drawings, and I think the hardest one for us, I think, is that drawbridge, primarily because of what we're trying to do, and so the drawbridge presents a problem for us. That Sally Gate, sort of, and what I mean by problems is we're trying to do it as quickly and as effectively as possible and be reliable. So right now we're not sure, based on what we have so far, if we're going to be able to do that effectively, and we're still looking at things. But for me, it's those two things that are going to be the toughest.
Colin, what do you think?
I am going to go with the low bar. I just think for a majority of teams, packaging that while being able to do everything else is going to cause a big issue that they're going to end up ignoring.
Sure. Let's talk about it in the qualification matches. We bring back the structure of, just winning the match isn't necessarily going to give you all the points that you're looking for when we have the ranking points as well too. So Glenn, to you, what's more important in quals? Is it winning the match itself or going for the breaching and the capturing as well?
I absolutely believe ranking points are important. I mean, we saw in 2012, I can give you an example for us. We were doing the Hawaii Regional. We were still stuck in that old mode of, you got to win the match, but in actuality, and that was our first event, doing the Hawaii Regional during week 4. There was another Hawaii team that had done another event prior to that, and they ended up ranking #1, and they were #1 because they knew that it was important to do that co-opetition and get those ranking points. And so, we had a record of, I believe it was like 11-1. There were like 2 of us that were 11-1, and we're ranked like 3rd and 4th because we never focused as much as we should have on the ranking points versus just the win and loss.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. I think the teams that were around for 2012 are going to know that, and the teams that have come around in the 4 years since then are going to have to learn it really quickly if they want to rank high.
So there's been a lot of talk on Chief Delphi and in other areas that, we talked a little about in the pre-show about how there could be a couple of robots that are multifunctional and do everything out there, but I think there's going to be a place for a lot of support bots where they're just meant to help out the alliance to be really successful when maybe they're a very strong playoff team. What do you think in your opinion, and maybe it could be for your robot or just in general, what do you think the optimal support bot role is going to be this year?
Well, I think you could have a really good support bot that doesn't even shoot in the high go or doesn't even hang. I mean, if you have a robot that can get through those barriers pretty effectively, a robot that just primarily focuses on that could be very different for what a robot that does everything or shoots in the high go or hangs. I mean, that it's crucial. I mean, it's a lot of points, whether it's ranking points or in the playoffs, you get additional points. I mean, those things are scored, or they're given the amount of points accordingly because I think FIRST wanted that to be important as well.
Absolutely. Yeah, damage a couple of defenses, maybe do a low goal or 2 to help weaken the tower, and then surround it at the end, I think is a perfect third robot at a lot of events.
Yeah.
It's funny, one of the things that I mentioned last week on recap is actually something that got, I believe, you can't do it anymore per one of the team updates, and that was finding a bot that could just hold the low bar flap open just to allow balls to roll through.
Mm.
So I was interested to see that that was disallowed in the new team update as well too.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have talked about it.
I know, right? Yeah, it's spoiled now. I'm sure that Frank and the rest of GDC watch every single one of these. So dang it, I'll remember that for next time. Let's talk about the robots that are going to be able to make it to Einstein, Glenn. Do you think that every single robot on Einstein is going to be able to scale?
I believe so. I think you get to that stage. I don't think you're going to get very far in the playoffs. I mean, if you expect to get far, excuse me, you have to be able to do everything. And I believe that there's going to be enough robots where you could field, a three-team alliance that's going to be able to scale and capture the flag.
Colin?
Yeah, I agree. At Einstein, I think you'll need those points just to get out of the division.
So I guess an interesting just follow-up if we think about that then. If that's true, I mean, teams then maybe need to rethink about what they are doing, if that is the strategy they want to go with. Personally, I think there'll be an opportunity where there's teams that might not be able to scale. They might be able to be very good at shooting boulders or be really fast at damaging defenses. I actually kind of take the opposite approach. I think there's going to be potentially a full alliance that, regardless if they can or can't, they might choose not to scale at all during maybe not on Einstein, at least far in the elims as well.
And I see the scaling as the perfect upgrade throughout the season, especially if you're a district team. You go to an event, the first couple of weeks and just focus on being able to score the balls, and then see what other teams are doing and how they're able to package up a hanging device or a scaling device, underneath the 14-inch bar and add that in as the season goes along.
Absolutely.
What about boulder scoring? Do you think every robot that's going to be an Einstein, yes or no, are they going to be able to score boulders in the high goal?
I think absolutely. I think it's just human nature. The one of the main parts of the game is scoring boulders, and I think the teams that are able to get to Einstein are going to be the ones that can definitely score in the high goal.
I don't know that every Einstein bot will be able to score in the high goal. I think because of the way the ranking points shake out, you could see an alliance captain who can only go in the low goal.
That's an interesting point, Colin. I didn't really actually think about that. I was very in the camp that every robot on Einstein would be able to score in the high goal. Yeah, that's interesting to think about that based on how ranking points work. That could really change that a lot. So, Glenn, maybe you can enlighten us on your team a bit, but do you think we're going to see a double boulder auto or multi-boulder auto from one robot this year? Is it going to be 359?
Ask us again in about 2 or 3 weeks. But there's always teams that push the envelope. I mean, I never thought you'd see a 3-ball auto in 2014.
Yeah.
And we know about the Poofs and a few other teams that could do it. So I'm sure teams like yours are probably looking at that, and I'm more than certain that we'll see that from Wave Robotics this year.
Well, without having inside info on that necessarily, I can comment that I think it's going to be something that we at least strive to do in Wave. I think it's going to be one of those like to do if we can. I mean, we want to be able to score a boulder in Ottawa, and that's going to be a big priority for us. Can we do more than that? That's the real trick, right? I agree with you. Ask us. For us, it will probably be ask us in about 5 weeks if that's even feasible. But yeah. So.
Yeah.
Colin, do you think it will happen?
Yes, I do.
What team's going to do it first, Colin?
Oh man, 118. I'll go with them, but I don't know when they compete. I should look that up.
Oh, that's a good point. So that's an unfair question to ask. So yeah, I think we'll definitely see it. I think somebody will figure out the trick. The interesting thing is going to be, and bringing up 118 is an interesting thing because I think about in 2011 where there were very few teams who kind of figured out the whole direct drive mini bot, and 118 put that video out there of them doing that in 2011, and a lot of teams caught on to that. Are we going to see a team who does it and then posts a video of it with enough time for teams to make modifications as well? I think that will be an interesting thing to see. So yeah, yes and no maybe on that.
So the Toronto East Regional 118 is competing there. It looks like it's week 2. That has 118, 610, 1114, and 2056, along with a host of other great Canadian teams. I think it happens there.
Yeah,
I
that's the
agree.
yeah. That's I was gonna say that's maybe the better question is what regional will we see it happen at first. So yeah, that's a great chance that we could see that there. Last question, Glenn, do you think at championships or even specifically on Einstein, do you think first will increase the tower strength? They mentioned that they could have the possibility of doing that, but we really haven't seen much of a change from regionals to championships in a few years. Do you think there's a possibility that will happen?
For me personally, I think it's not going to happen. They always say every year or the last several years that they have the right to change the point structure. But I think when you get to Einstein, yes, teams will be able to do maybe every facet of the game, but now you factor in other things. I mean, we haven't really talked about defense or other kind of strategies in. And when you pit two great alliances against each other, it doesn't necessarily mean that you know they might not score the most points in that match, but there's going to be other factors that I think we're not talking about that's going to not make first feel like they need to increase the points for the weakening the tower.
Well, let's talk about that a little bit. Actually, the kind of skip on and move ahead with that is, I think, at least in my opinion, maybe it's been a little bit diluted from last year, where it was all offense, offense, offense all the time. Now we have to shift, back into a game where there is offense and defense out there.
Right.
It will be interesting. Do you mind elaborating a bit more, Glenn, on kind of what your opinions are in regards to defensive robots or more of the not primary, just scoring robots? How are those robots going to interact on the field, or how will those alliance strategies work out?
Well, I think the biggest factor when you talk about defense, when I first saw this game, it kind of reminded me of 2010, where you had one goalie, two scorers in that scoring zone. And so, I mean, we could go into the effective safe zone, but really, if to try and score from anywhere in that courtyard with a defender, easier said than done. And I think we learned that in 2014 when, we had such a big goal, big wide opening. Everyone thought, geez, the target is so large. How hard can it be? But really, scoring by yourself versus with a defender is very, very different and very difficult. So I just don't foresee them increasing the scoring threshold to weaken the tower.
And I guess from my side, I can kind of talk about that because I was on game design committee when that
Yeah.
clause, that language was first put in there, and I always felt that that changing it would be the wrong thing to do, um, because it always specifically applied to the end game, right? And I felt, and a lot of people on the game design committee felt that, okay, unless something is really, really broken, to where the end game, no one is doing it, or people do it with 2 minutes left, and um, that's all you see in a match. So many teams make that value calculation the first day or two after kickoff that really drives and impacts robot design. To change that right before championship was really the wrong thing to do, and so I think that's one of the reasons why it was never changed. This, I feel like, is the first year where that potential change doesn't necessarily have as big of an impact or any impact on robot design. Obviously, we'll see what that looks like as the season progresses. But this is the first year that I feel like it's maybe slightly more possible than it had been in the past.
Yeah, there's some really good points on both ends, and I think it will be interesting, like I said, just to see the overall dynamic and how that evolves over the season, right? We could see in the beginning, where we just have robots on only offense, we could see a lot more defense, and I think as alliances start to work together more and more and more as we get through, we're going to see not maybe one strategy prevail, but I think we're going to see a mix of 3 or 4 different main type of strategies that alliances will approach, and I think it will be up to the alliances they compete in the elims and as they go further on, hopefully to Einstein, of how they adapt to the different alliances out there, and that kind of I think brings into just the importance that scouting is this year too. I know there's been some posts on Chief Delphi about that, and I completely agree that this is the year of scouting. Man, if your team doesn't have anything for that, get somebody on that. Start focusing on that, because getting statistics on what robots do this year with so many different elements and so many different strategies is just going to be that much more important.
Absolutely.
Glenn, if you mind me asking before we move on, what does 359 do for scouting with teams? How does that process work?
You know, that's a tough question. I don't think it's hard for us to answer. We're definitely not the experts. You know, we've been successful at regionals. I think we've made some great picks over the years. I don't think I ever had a regional in recent years where we felt like we made an absolutely wrong pick. But as far as scouting, we don't have anything elaborate. We do videotape matches. We do look at certain robots and their features, and we do take some data. But you know, for us, it's hard. We don't bring a full team to every event. For example, our
Sure.
first event in Minnesota, we're only going to have 10 people. Last year when we did Inland Empire, we had 4 kids, 3 on the drive team and 1 scouter. And our scouter he got sick. He didn't even go on the trip. So we were scouting by watching matches in between our matches. And so it just makes it that much harder. But yet I think we do have enough experience where we can watch for certain things and try to help make our lines better. And I think teams in general, like you mentioned, are really going to have to do that this year to maximize their alliance and their capabilities.
All right, so before we get into more of the meat of that and some of the things you brought up, Glenn, with how you handle different regionals, we definitely want to get more into that with all the different events you guys do all around the world and during the year. But before we do that, let's take a break and thank our sponsor for the show, AndyMark. If you haven't gotten a chance to look, bumpers are back for the 2016 season. You better be prepared, because if it's not just robots you have to prepare against, but some beefy field elements out there as well. And AndyMark has what you need to make sure that no defense or robot will give you the impact problems. So check out their new red and blue bumper kit that they have posted on their website. If you have the KOP kit chassis, and I strongly recommend that you order this now. The bumper kit comes with 12 solid pool noodles, red and blue bumper material, and the hardware you need to securely mount this to your robot. And if you prefer to make your own customized bumpers, you say, well, AndyMark has the materials you need for that as well. I'm a big fan of their bumper material, especially their slick bumper material. But regardless of which way you go, at 161 by 19.5 inches, you'll have more than enough material to cover your entire robot frame perimeter. AndyMark wishes all teams the best of luck in 2016, and go on over to check them out at andymark.com, and we thank them for their support of supporting Spotlight.
So, Glenn, as we pick back up, you've been involved with robotics for a while. So let's start at the beginning and get kind of an overview of your experiences before we dig deeper. Was FIRST your first robotics experience?
Yes, it was. I started off as an engineer, worked for a year, somehow got into education, was a science teacher, and up until the time we started in '99, I had no idea. I didn't even know FIRST existed. And I think a lot of people know this already, but in case people didn't know, we got started by the Cheesy Poofs. Their rookie year was the 98-99 season, and we knew some people from NASA Ames, and they had contacted us about this program, FIRST Robotics, and they actually brought the Cheesy Poofs rookie year robot to our school, and it's the first time I met all of them and heard about it. At the same time, I saw their robot.
So can we go a little bit more into that with 359? Would you be able to share more about kind of the first year of 359? Like, how did that work out? And you got started by the Poofs. You got, I mean, that's a great team to get under your belt, right? And to be there to mentor you. How did that process work in your first year of establishing your program as a rookie team moving forward?
You know, our first year, I thought that was going to be our first and only year. It was really tough. You know, I think what's different about our team is that, you know, we had that hurdle of how we're going to raise money to attend this event. I mean, how do we get our robot to San Jose, which is at the time where the event was, and And so I think for us, we're sort of at a disadvantage because we had to look at a lot more things other than just trying to participate in first. It was a very rough build season that first year. I still remember we had 18 students, and we said we were going to go home by dinner time. By week 2 and 3, we're there till like 8, 9 o'clock at night, and then the last 2 weeks of the season, we're there till midnight. I mean, it's not an exaggeration. We were just frustrated but determined to try to field a robot for that event. And when you when you commit to going on a trip and you start paying for airline tickets and stuff, you better have a robot that's going to compete. If not, you're going to have a lot of angry people. And so we were very determined to try to field something, and we had a not bad rookie year.
So your rookie year, though, this was before the Hawaii Regional, and we'll talk about the founding and how that worked out in a little bit. But where did you guys go your rookie year? Obviously it was overseas, right, into the States somewhere. So where did you go and how did that work out?
So the San Jose Regional, which I believe was called the Southern California, it had a different name. It wasn't called Silicon Valley at the time, but that was our home regional. So every year, I believe for the first 4 or 5 years, we only went to that regional, and that was our home regional. And so the Hawaii Regional came about, I believe it was during our 9th season. So it was quite a while before we actually had our.
Oh, I think we might have lost Glenn. Are you there, Glenn?
You got me?
Yep, I think we got you now.
Okay.
So Glenn, you said that first year, those first couple of years were tough. You guys went through some tough times there. What anything else going on, and then what kind of led to this amazing turnaround where, really just a little while later, you're a Hall of Fame team winning the Championship Chairman's Award?
Well, I think, I think it was just a work in progress. From the very beginning, I believe that our team had a different mindset. It was more than about building robots. It was having the partnerships and being able to survive and continue to do first over, year after year. So we had to have a plan, and I think our plan didn't change over the years. I think we stuck with it, and it just some good things happened for us. I started looking at writing more grants, getting more support. We have a lot more mentors than we did back then, and so I think for teams, especially for newer teams, if you have that good foundation that you plan out from the beginning, it may not work out in the beginning or maybe the first several years, but if you stick with it, I think more opportunities will come about, and then you'll be able to participate more and be better. I think the turning point for us was when we started doing more than one regional and started going to these different places. Go ahead.
No, that's fine. I was going to say when you mentioned as the team starts to move forward towards the, winning the Chairman's Award and being a Hall of Fame team, I remember I think it was 2007, that the governor of Hawaii spoke at the kickoff, right? If I'm correct.
Right, and so she was our governor from 2002 to 2010. So during her 2006 year when she got reelected, all of that time prior, we were trying to push this whole idea of STEM. I mean, it wasn't called STEM at the time, but the idea of technology and the whole innovation in Hawaii, and actually helped get a couple of bills introduced. And I think that caught her attention. And then from that point on, she had met Dean, and she really is the driving force behind why we have the Hawaii Regional. And that just brought about more opportunities for us when we wrote grants, because we had the support of our state. There was more opportunities for us to do more with other schools and do more outreach and get our name out there. So I think that indirectly springboarded us to be able to do what we do today.
And you had let's talk about the founding of the Hawaii Regional, because I think that was a pretty big turning point for Hawaii, right, in regards to getting teams. You had 359 was around, and then 368, right, Team Keikimana.
Right.
but there weren't really too many other teams until the Hawaii Regional came around. Do you mind elaborating a bit more on what the process was of getting that regional going, and then what really kicked off like the explosion of teams that happened in Hawaii?
Well, I can tell you that today Hawaii has over 750 organized robotics programs. There's like 6 different types of robotics programs that all our Hawaii schools are involved with, from grades K through 12. And and when we first started, it was our team and 368. The following year, there was actually 2 more Hawaii teams. There was a few more Hawaii teams along the way. Some of them folded and didn't stick with it, but for the long haul, it was us. It was our team and 368. And so when the governor got that we would have an FRC team, and the goal was to have it in every high school in Hawaii. And so I believe we have about 30 teams, give or take, a few, year after year. And again, that wouldn't have been possible without the support of our legislature. They help provide more funding. They got the businesses and the foundations and stuff to support STEM and all these schools. So, without that, I mean, you wouldn't have 30 Hawaii teams like there are today, and our own regional.
So in moving on in 2009, the Hawaiian Kids decided to expand a bit outside of just FIRST, right, into the VEX programs, and 359 has been extremely successful in both programs. What led your program to move forward with both VEX and FIRST, and how do those 2 programs work together to make you successful overall?
Well, Hawaii actually started VEX, I believe, in 2007, 2008. But we never got involved, and initially we didn't want to get involved because I just thought just doing FIRST by itself was just a lot of work. And but we finally got into it, like you mentioned, in 2009. And one of the benefits we saw with doing other robotics programs such as VEX was it allowed more of our kids to get involved. When you do FIRST, there's just that inherent part of it where there's only so much kids that are going to be on the drive team. You can get all your kids involved in the build process and construction and the other areas of your program. But really, VEX was scalable, and it allowed us to do it, especially with our younger kids too. And so we use that as a springboard for FIRST, so that when we have kids, especially when they're beginners, they're not just doing only observations and not being able to do much. We want them to be able to do more, and so we try to use VEX as a platform and try to work it out throughout the year so that we can do both programs and help our kids ultimately be more successful and smarter as a result.
So, Glenn, Hawaii's, it's not one of the biggest states in terms of size and population. So how are the Hawaiian Kids and all of the programs in Hawaii able to be successful and not only sustain but continue to grow all these STEM programs like you were talking about?
Well, that's a good question. It's actually really tough. One of the we're such a small state. We got our programs are growing. I mean, the hard part about that is now there's less funding to go around. But I think overall, for all the Hawaii stakeholders that are involved in STEM, they're really pushing. We're trying to get more funds to support more schools, and I think like a lot of other teams and states, that's a challenge when you start growing. But so far we're still moving ahead. I think we've been able, since that time when our governor was did that kickoff. I think as a state, everyone recognizes that STEM is an integral part of a kid's education if they're interested in those fields, and that it requires funding. It's not cheap, and so I think as a whole for our state, most of our stakeholders pretty much get it, and so they're just trying to find ways to help support it as it grows in Hawaii.
So speaking about funding, you mentioned, obviously the problem with more teams, the less slice or the more slices are taken out of the pie. and the less for specifically the Hawaiian Kids have, but the Hawaiian Kids have done a phenomenal job in fund development, and we know they travel all over the world. So what's the secret recipe here? What are you guys doing that allow you to accomplish the goals that you want to do, and all the amazing fund development that you do in order to make your program work?
You know, that's really my specialty and what I spent a lot of time on over the years. You know, I always get that question a lot. You know, how do you get your sponsors? How do you raise so much money? I think the one thing that people misunderstand about our program is we don't necessarily will ask for, let's say, $10,000 from a sponsor to support our team. We try to offer more than that. So we package our programs. You know, for example, we got this $50,000 grant, which is called the REACH grant. And the focus of that was providing our middle school kids with robotics opportunities. And so we wrote this grant thinking that maybe, let's say, for example, we need $10,000 for our middle school program. I'm not going to write to that specific donor and say, well, we want $10,000 for 20 kids. Instead, I'll ask for more money and package it as a whole. So like, we actually wrote that grant to support our band. We support intermediate intramural sports. We actually buy all our kids' uniforms. We buy new band equipment. And so we package it as a overall, you know, we support, the theme is middle school, after school programs. And so we're able to leverage a lot of that funding towards what we want by writing a bigger package grant. And that allows us to get more opportunities to get bigger equipment rather than just nickel and diming and writing for all these small grants.
So Glenn, how do your students continue to contribute to that sustainability structure?
Well, they definitely spend a lot of time on all of our outreach initiatives. They understand. I still make our kids fundraise, you know, bake sale, sell. In Hawaii, there's this thing called Zippy's Chili. It's such a big thing. It's like a fundraiser item where you can make $2 a ticket. We still do a lot of those things because I want our kids to appreciate just how hard it is to raise money. And so when we have an opportunity to do an event for one of our donors, or to put on a robotics night or a demonstration night, or help out at a beach cleanup or something, our kids are always, they understand that those things are important, and that's just as important as building a robot and competing. So that with that established partnership, you know, our donors give back and they help support our team because they know we're willing to help them out. I mean, everything's a give and take. It's always, nothing's for free. You always got to provide something which is of value added benefit to some organization if you're going to ask for their support. And I think that's what we try to do a good job at year in and year out.
So if we jump to 2011, you mentioned the engagement that your kids have, not just in the robot, obviously, but in a lot more of what 359 does as a whole. So 2011 championship comes. You guys win the Chairman's Award. Do you mind describing what you feel led up to you winning the Chairman's Award, and then describe the experience itself? I mean, being down at championships and hearing your team called, I mean, that's just got to be euphoric, I would think.
I got to say that was, you know, everybody has these greatest moments in their life, and for me, it was just so surreal. You know, I still remember it was during that Black Eyed Peas concert, and they had an intermission, and when they called our team, I still to this day, I'm just very humbled and honored that they, you know, for whatever reason, they selected our program. For us, I felt good about it because I felt like everything that we said about our program was what we did from the very start, and that it was such a long journey. It wasn't something that we had developed, you know, just years prior. I think it was from the very beginning our goal that we were going to do more than just build robots. And so for first to have recognized that, this is very humbling. And I don't know what else to say about it other than, you know, whether or not you're applying for a Chairman's Award or not. I mean, even since 2011, I think we're still doing as much, if not more, than what we did back then. And, you know, award or not, we're gonna do it regardless.
Yeah, so, Glenn, in your mind, what was the biggest factor to the people who haven't seen it or haven't read your essay? What do you think really cemented you all as the Chairman's Award winner that year?
The biggest thing that sticks out to me, something that I think we were doing that a lot of other teams weren't doing yet, and I tie it back to Dean's homework. It's when he wanted. I think back then there wasn't. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe I didn't hear about other teams too much, but the fact that we were involved with our legislature and our governor, and Dean had that homework where talk to your senators, talk to your representative, get the word out. Um, I think we did a good job of that. And I think us among other teams like 368 and other stakeholders, I think we all did a really good job of convincing our legislature that, having a region in Hawaii was a great thing. And, all of that was all tied together. But again, getting our legislature involved, because they're the ones that can make it happen and help it grow. I think that was the biggest factor in us winning the championship chairman's award.
If I can follow up on that, Glenn, from the getting your legislator involved, what level was that done at? Is that done at a state committee level, or is that individual teams banding together, or just one team? How did Hawaii or even 359 go about approaching getting the state legislator involved?
Well, there's a couple of people in Hawaii that have been instrumental in doing STEM type of activities from the University of Hawaii. Some of them we met from doing other STEM related projects. They were actually, I'm not going to take credit for that. They were the ones that provided the opportunity. I think where we provided the value was they can talk about it with our legislature, how great it is, but it was really us and 368 who, when the governor came out to our school, I think that's when things changed. I mean, there's a lot of great STEM programs out there, and we all hear about it, and we're like, oh yeah, that's great, sounds good, but there's nothing like seeing a FIRST robotics operation and hearing about it and seeing that competition and the impact that it has. And I think we were able to provide that opportunity for them to see it. And I think that helped springboard along with other stakeholders in helping it move forward. And so, again, it's just, when they asked us to do something, we went out of our way to do it. We went out of our way to have our governor at our school twice. We went out of our way to go to the state capitol, even though it was, about an hour and a half away from our school. We always took advantage of the opportunities to be able to present and showcase what FIRST was all about.
That makes a lot of sense. So now you've won chairmans. We're way past 2011 now. Just because you win chairmans at the championship level doesn't mean you stop, right? So what is 359 doing now to continue their outreach and to continue the message and the inspiration of chairmans?
Well, we do get a lot of emails from teams, and we never ever not respond. We always try to provide resources and help. I mean, I think a lot of teams do that, but one of the neat things I think we're doing now is, because of all of our equipment and the resources that we've gotten in recent years, we try to help our local community and other businesses. So, for example, Haleiwa, Wailua is an old town. We have this embroidery company, for example. They have this old machine that they couldn't order a new part, some kind of plastic gear that they needed that no longer was available. So we 3D printed about 10 of those things for them, and they're like very happy about it. It's just neat. So we try to help other teams, I think, more than ever before because of what we have. We also are looking for other innovative ways of fundraising and making money. So we have some partnerships with a lot of local businesses where we actually make parts for them. I'll give you a couple of examples. One is, one of the big things in Hawaii is for cars are safety check brackets. And so now Hawaii passed this law where you can put a safety check bracket and attach your vehicle safety check and all these stickers on there. So we work with some of our local automotive shops, and we actually water jet and make those things for them, and in return they might donate, they donate to our program. Another example is there's this company called Hammerhead Spear Guns, because spear gun fishing is very popular in Hawaii. They're a very big company, I think worldwide, and so they asked us to help them with one of their processes in how they make the spear gun tips. And so we developed a jig and a way to cut it out on our water jet. And so now, I mean, he's saving a lot on labor, and he's buying our technology and our research, and he's donating to our program. So, a lot more where we can actually help people in addition to us just simply asking for funding. We want to do something in return and provide a greater good. So that's really what our focus is now, as opposed to just writing letters, writing grants, and just trying to get funding to support our program.
So Glenn, as First Vex and other programs continue to grow and move forward, there's a lot of challenges and a lot of opportunities. Would you mind kind of giving us your insight on where you kind of see everything fitting into the big picture? Kind of the next 5-10 years. Is it you guys were obviously very involved with your state government. We've seen what that can do in Michigan with their explosive growth in number of FRC teams. Is that really the next step for STEM programs moving forward?
I gotta say, with the introduction of FIRST Robotics when we first started versus now, it's huge. Not just FIRST, but all these other robotics programs. Even if you look at all of our own robots from 10 years ago, I mean, we look at those things and we laugh at, oh, we used to do those things, and even from the great teams, I mean, I think they laugh at themselves as well. I mean, not that it's bad, but you can just see that progression. And I think, in general, a lot of the technology and the things that people did as adults, as professionals, are now trickling down to not just the high school level, but you see it in middle school and elementary school. My daughter's doing coding already in the first grade. I would never have thought that you would teach kids programming at that level. So I think from and helping the world, so to speak, as far as adding towards the technology and the intellect, whatever the world technology and the intelligence and whatnot. But yeah, I think it does have a big impact, and I think the whole idea of nerds rule is a big thing. I mean I think kids, when I look at our kids and I look at younger kids, they look up to kids that are pretty smart. I mean, maybe it might have been a little different before, it might have been the minority, but I think that's where a lot of kids aspire to be now because of what's out there today and because of programs like FIRST.
So we talked about with the Hawaiian Kids, you guys do a lot of traveling and a lot of going to, not just the continental United States, but all over the world. And I'm going to assume your students do that too. You talked about, going to Duluth this year, you're bringing 10 kids or something around that. So they kind of ask the question, obviously you don't bring all your kids to every single competition, right? And then how do they make up for lost school, or can you just kind of go through that whole process on who you select for which competitions, who goes where, and how does that fit into their schooling and their life?
Well, our kids, I mean, they got to go through a lot. We obviously travel a lot, and by traveling, you missed a lot of school. We try to schedule it around our spring break or the winter break or during the summer and whatnot, and certain other holidays. But we have some kids that the way we select kids for certain trips is simply based on what programs they're involved with. So if they're involved in VEX, they're gonna go to their whatever events we sign up for. We had the opportunity to participate in VEX in both Japan and China, and so we ask our kids if they're interested. I mean, it's optional, but usually we have about 1 or 2 teams that or group of kids that are interested in attending. So it's primarily based on interest. If they feel they can handle, the schoolwork missed, and they can afford to pay for part of the trip, and we subsidize the rest. I mean, we definitely want, as much as possible, every kid to be able to have the opportunity where they say if they want to go, that we make it happen for them. But yeah, so I would say for some of our kids, they travel as much as 50 to 60 days a year, so it's quite a bit of traveling. Yeah.
What about you though, Glenn? I mean, do you go to every single one of these trips that Hawaiian Kids goes to?
I did until until this recent one in China where I had a newborn daughter. So that one, my wife.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I still tried to talk my way out of it, but my wife said, "Oh no, no, I'm sorry." She drew the line on that one. Yeah.
What
Understandable.
what
So,
if you don't mind me asking real quick? What out of all these events that you've gone to, is there a single like favorite event or favorite area or venue or anything like that? It's got to be Duluth, right? You come right during the middle of winter and you go skiing, right?
Well, this is our second time going to Duluth in 3 years, so or 2 years. So that's yeah, it's definitely well because it's a double-decker regional. You know, we did one, so we always said we're gonna try and compete on the other side of that black curtain
Hmm.
and do the other one. But no, actually, you know, for us, a big part of what we want to do is if we're going to travel from Hawaii to somewhere else by flying, we definitely want to try all the different regionals. You know, one thing that I didn't mention earlier is we have a lot of kids every year that have never been on a plane ride ever. And so every year I have at least one or two kids that for the first time in their life, they're flying on a plane. And we want to give them that experience. You know, they may never off island again. And so to provide this opportunity for our kids to see what's out there, I think that's really, really valuable in addition to just participating in regional. So we try to go to a different event every year, at least one or two different ones every year.
so Glenn, with that, extra cost and extra burden for all the teams, on the islands there, to come to any event that's not the Hawaii Regional. Are there any conversations locally about some type of small district model in Hawaii to try and get more playtime without a significant travel burden?
We're definitely talking about that. And so the biggest challenge is we have a lot of teams from all the different islands. The problem is the biggest challenge is so we have a team, we have teams on Maui. You know what happens when when they compete in Honolulu, they're flying. I mean, they're spending a lot of money to stay in hotels and whatnot. They can't just drive there. So, we had talked about, I think we had talked about maybe having an event on Maui, but the same problem exists now for all the Oahu teams. We have to all fly and get our robots there. So it's still the same kind of challenge, whether or not we fly to California versus flying to another island. The logistics and the costs can get pretty high. So can figure that part out or figure out a way to support it and maybe have some local companies sponsor the shipment of the robots from island to island, then I think it's very doable. We've been told in the past that you could have two events and be part of a district or be part of California or something to that effect.
So I think the solution, Glenn, is we start 40 teams in every single island with its own event. Then nobody has to travel.
True, but you go to an island like Molokai or the Big Island, Hawaii Island. I don't even know how many high schools are out there, but I think they're less than 10 each. So I don't think you're going to get. Or I think Molokai only has one high school, so a little bit more
Oh, that
challenging.
might complicate that a little bit then,
Yeah,
right?
just a little bit. Yeah.
All right, so we are running a little bit short on time, but I'd like to bring in one of the questions we had from somebody in our audience. So I'd like to thank Caltran from 2410 for submitting the following question. And you talked a little bit about this, Glenn, but I think he has a really good point that he says that 359 has more sponsors than some teams have kids. What's your advice on getting more sponsors, particularly areas where there are heavier team densities? He asks, do you do targeted requests or do you just send out a million letters and hope that a few come back?
We definitely do not send out. I don't believe in sending out more letters and then hoping to get a better response. When people get random letters, I think it's hard to give money or provide support. My suggestion is, and based off our own experiences, our sponsor list is a culmination of all these years of inviting people to our events. During the 6 week of the build season, we always have this open house event where we invite people, we invite our community, we invite sponsors, potential people. Sometimes all it takes is one person, one CEO from an engineering company to come visit your event, and then he has friends or they have connections, and then pretty soon you got more and more people, supporting your program. And for us, that's really how it worked. We didn't. It was never about sending out more letters to people. It was more about, doing more outreach. I mean, you can't. We don't do an outreach event and say, okay, well, because we're doing this event, hopefully we'll get a couple thousand from this sponsor. It always happens by accident. And you just meet people. The more you get out there, I think the more chances of finding people to support you. And I think if you're in a rural area, I think it's better. It's even better because you're at a disadvantage. I think a lot of times people will sponsor or give more money for programs that are out in rural communities.
Well, Glenn, thank you so much for being on. That's all the time we're going to have for Spotlight tonight. Glenn is the director of the Hawaiian Kids in the Wailua Robotics program. And thank you so much once again for letting us know about the inner workings of 359 and your thoughts on the FRC season. Do you want to let people know where they can find out more about the Hawaiian Kids and your programs?
Sure. You could visit us on wailuarobotics.com. We have a website there. We are currently undergoing redoing it, but for the time being, you can see the latest outreach events we do, what competitions we're going to be competing in, as well. You can also follow our build season. Every week we post a little summary about where our progress and how we're doing. So please visit our website if you get a chance.
Thank you, Glenn, once again. And Colin Foltz, thank you so much for making another great appearance on Spotlight, keeping it as our co-host and contributing some great content. Thanks, Colin.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And a big thank you to our producer, Nick Olson, for working behind the scenes. Thanks, Nick.
You're welcome, Tyler.
And Chat Nation and viewers, all that we ask is that if you're interested in the show and interested in learning more about FIRST and the people of FIRST, go on Facebook, Twitter, or any other area that you want and just let people know about the show. Don't forget to subscribe to our Twitch and YouTube channels under FIRST Updates Now. And you can also find us on iTunes or your favorite podcast program. This will help our programs grow and make FIRST even more loud. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Our email address is firstupdatesnow@gmail.com. And you can catch Fun Network shows live weekly on Tuesdays at 8:30 p.m. Eastern. Our next show will be Recap on Tuesday, the 26th, with our next guest, Greg Nadell, CEO of Rev Robotics and mentor on FRC359 at the Allsparks, where we're going to get a bit deeper into the strategy behind Stronghold. See you next time on Spotlight.